It's about supremacy, it's about entitlement, it's about indoctrination, it is about dehumanization. It is about them believing that the Palestinian people are lesser of a human beings. You have senior Israeli officials saying that everybody in Gaza is a human animal. When this whole Gaza humanitarian fund was established, it was established not just to kill the Palestinians, but to humiliate the person you are going to kill. The whole idea is crushing your spirit, driving you all the way, miles, while you are starved, almost a skeleton. Walking all the way, put you in a cattle-like corridor. You've seen the images, the world have seen the images. And then the moment you get there, they spray you with bullets. You've seen the accounts in Haaretz where soldiers admitted, Israeli soldiers admitted to Israeli newspapers that they have had orders to shoot, to kill at the starving people. You've seen even accounts of international media, the Associated Press, of the American mercenaries who are war criminals, and we will hold them accountable. Every one of them, the American mercenaries, who have also told the international media they have orders to kill. One of them said that another mercenary was standing by him and he saw him shooting at a crowd of elderly women, children, because that crowd was moving slower than they should be.
Hello and welcome. And today we're joined by His Excellency Husam Zomlot, the Palestine ambassador. Thank you very much for coming, Ambassador. I just wondered if I could begin by asking you, we're now some 20 months in to this terrible conflict, war, terrible attack on civilians that's gone on for almost 2 years now. And this genocide continues to unfold in real time. And people, of course, in Gaza and elsewhere in the world are wondering, how does it stop? When does it stop?
I think the one lesson we learn from the horrors of the Second World War is how do we prevent such carnage, such insanity, such evil that the human race is capable to inflict on one another, as the humanity witnessed during the horrible years of the Second World War and before. And that's why in 1948, that's exactly the same year Israel was established, at the skulls of the Palestinian people, the ethnic cleansing of 2/3 of our nation, was the signing of the Convention on the Prevention of Genocide, same year. And the world vowed to prevent such mass murder, mass destruction, mass starvation. And the world has failed. The world has failed the people in Palestine, our people in Gaza, and in the West Bank, by the way. But it also, the world has failed itself completely and utterly. We know that in such situations, the world should have immediately intervened. Number one, to prevent it, not just to stop it. But having failed to prevent it, they should have stopped it long ago, especially that this is the first ever live-streamed genocide, particularly when the world conscience have been dented by the daily images of children, women, elderly men, people, schools, hospitals, medics, journalists. A very well-designed act and campaign of annihilation, extermination. So this will have serious ramification on all of us. And then the people know what the world should have been doing. Number one, in such situation, the world is obliged to send actually armies to prevent and to protect civilians, as they did in the Balkans. But if you fail to do so, if you don't get a Security Council resolution to actually go and protect people from such evil, at least you stop being complicit. The least. You don't help, aid genocide. And that has to go through a full arms embargo, complete from day one. Sanctions, sanctioning all the political and military officials responsible for this mass murder campaign. Thirdly, accountability. The world should have been up in arms to make sure that war criminals are behind bars immediately and not to wait until they actually finish off the job.
But if the UN security fails, as it has, then surely it should go to the UN General Assembly.
Yes.
Uniting for Peace. You'll know that during the Korean War, the United Nations did dispatch the military. You'll know that during apartheid South Africa, the General Assembly, Uniting for Peace, called for economic and military sanctions. What is holding the General Assembly up now from doing just that?
The General Assembly has taken many of such resolutions, by the way. And Uniting for Peace has convened many times for Palestine. The ICJ has just declared last year that Israel's presence, all of its presence in the occupied territory, is unlawful and must cease immediately. That all of its illegal settlements are unlawful, and that, all third parties must cease to lend any political, financial, or military support to Israel. The problem is not in the General Assembly. The problem is not in the international law. The problem is in the specific countries, the so-called allies of Israel. Number one is the US, but also many Western countries, who continue to make Israel the exception to every rule, who continue to put Israel above every single rule we have built together, above legality. And the result is this. The result is this impunity that has lasted for 77 years has gotten us where we are today. Genocide, extermination.
And with, you mentioned the supporters, or at least some of those countries that have been complicit and should be acting but aren't. But amongst Netanyahu's diminishing band of supporters out there, there's always been this claim that if the hostages are released, that's it, it's all over. But the question is, the last ceasefire was broken by Israel in March, as you know. So what faith can you have that Israel, and perhaps the United States as well, would stick to a new ceasefire agreement? And what about the plan beyond that? Because we see from the Israeli press that there's been a row within the Israeli cabinet about what Netanyahu might want to do next. This is a temporary ceasefire, possibly. So what do you do when, and do you trust these parties when they've walked out from previous ceasefires?
Well, nobody trusts Netanyahu. We don't. And, he has broken every single deal, not just the last ceasefire agreement in January, but all the previous agreements, including the agreements with us, with the PLO. We signed in 1993 an agreement that we would actually get to a state of Palestine in the 5-year period, that this interim arrangement would have been a process of backrolling occupation and advancing the sovereignty of the Palestinian state and people. And Netanyahu, single-handedly is responsible of derailing this whole process, breaking the promises, breaching all the agreements, and the result is complete devastation of all the provisions of the Oslo Accord. So this is chronic. This is rather a pattern of Netanyahu, who could be credited by actually devastating any possibility of any political horizon. Will he do it again? I think yes, he is. That's why we must tackle the root cause of all this, and we must tackle the idea of and the situation of impunity, either for Netanyahu or for any other Israeli leader, because it's not just about Netanyahu. Yes. When you see opinion polls coming from Israel, when you see the entire political class in Israel ganging up in that way as it did in the last 20-odd months, you know that you need to really focus on the entirety of the situation in Israel, and this requires serious pressure. And the pressure is mounting via the public opinion. You see the changes here in the UK, you see the changes worldwide. We need to translate that public opinion change into concrete actions by the various governments to make sure that Israel complies with international law.
Well, you mentioned international law. Israel clearly has not been complying with it. And in fact, the UN Charter, the Geneva Conventions, international humanitarian law, many have said that this has been completely shattered, really, by the actions of Israel. And I just wanted to move on briefly, if I could, to the human cost of all of this, because we have reported in the West, on our media, the reports are usually refer to the Hamas-run health authority, who say that over 55,000 Palestinians have been killed. Well, last week, and you'll know this, Haaretz, an Israeli paper, is reporting it believes that 100,000 Palestinians may have been killed in Gaza. That's 4% of the population. And majority, of course, as you know, women and children. And this is based on a study by Michael Spaggart, who's an economist at Holloway College in London. He's a world-class expert on mortality in violent conflicts. And so these figures are massively higher than what are being reported and what are being also reported by the health authorities in Hamas. So what do you make of that? What I suppose the question is, Ambassador, is what is the world going to find when it finally gets into Gaza?
Horror. And I dread the day that I would go back to Gaza, or the world will be able to access Gaza, and the media will take it up its responsibility seriously and report the situation from Gaza, what they will find. It's horror. So I don't think this report is far from the actual situation, the truth. I mean, we really still don't know how many people are still buried under tons of rubble. How many children are still buried there? I speak to many of my family members in Gaza, many of our friends and neighbors. And their biggest issue now is not that they have it's not only that they have lost loved ones. Their biggest issue is to bury their loved ones. I spoke to a man who broke my heart, who told me that I only need to find my child and bury him, because they're still not found. So there are many people who are still under the rubble. We don't know the numbers. And this is not just about the people who Israel killed directly by airstrikes and shelling and sniping. You've seen the medical reports. Children are shot in the back of their head multiple times. But it's not that only. It's the people who died, who were killed by other means. And I know many of my own family who died because they couldn't have access to their kidney dialysis, who died because there was no regular medications, who died because there was no medical treatment altogether, because Israel has devastated the entire medical sector. So the number of people who have been murdered by Israel is going to be far more than the count of health authorities, that they just count the ones who access hospital and then they declare death definitely. And this is going to be, if these numbers are going to be roughly accurate, you're talking about a big portion of the Gaza population.
Yes.
A big percentage of the Gaza population. And Mark, the other day I was just calculating, in average now, every single day there is 100 Palestinian children either killed or maimed in Gaza only. 100, either killed or maimed. That means that every 16 minutes there is a child being killed or maimed by Israel until this day. So in the course of this conversation, most likely 4 or 5 Palestinian children would have been killed or maimed as we speaking. So I am afraid these assessments, these grim assessments, might be actually correct.
Yes.
And we're not even talking about the people who lost their lives because of the malnutrition. We're not talking about we're not talking about people who lost their lives because they simply had heart attacks. Every other day I'm hearing a family member, a neighbor, a friend just died. And by the way, young. Why do you think? Why?
Yes.
This is because of the utter feeling of being left alone, of being...
Ambassador, you'll know that one of the seminal events, and it took a long time for apartheid to be dismantled in South Africa. One of the seminal events was the Sharpeville massacre. I remember growing up and reading about it and seeing it, and then seeing separately what happened in Soweto. But this, as you were talking just then, I was thinking this, and you're talking about the numbers of civilians being killed by the Israelis each day. It's a Sharpeville massacre every single day. And beyond that, because so many times when you listen to Western commentators, they talk as though all of this began on October the 7th with those Hamas attacks. But when it comes to the use of food and aid, is it not the case that Israel has been doing this for decades in Gaza? And people forget this. They've been doing it for decades. And also this new system that they have set up, essentially, as far as we can see, a group of American mercenaries supported by the IDF, there's some foundation who won't go on the record, at a 4 or 5 distribution points, completely displaced the whole system. So is this really about, it's more than just control and reducing the number of Palestinians. But beyond, if this continues, do you think that the Israelis really want to drive the Palestinians from their homeland altogether if they can? Perhaps they'll blow a hole through the fences into Egypt and push people.
It's not me thinking or you thinking, it's what they are saying and doing. I mean, they are very public about it. I mean, very senior minister in this cabinet. And by the way, many blame some fanatical members of the Netanyahu. It's Netanyahu himself. He has been elected already in 1996. You know how many years? Almost 20 years ago. And he's been, by the way, either the prime minister or the shadow prime minister. He's been in control of the Israeli political sphere for all this long. And he's been elected on one ticket. Elect me and I will completely and utterly block the very idea of a Palestinian state. If you don't want a Palestinian state to emerge, so what is your alternative? Extermination. You either do it slowly via the settlements and the theft of land and the slow murder of people, as in the West Bank before the October 7th. It was the deadliest year for Palestinian children in the West Bank, according to international reports. Or you do it on steroids, as you're doing it right now in Gaza. So it's about supremacy. It's about supremacy, it's about entitlement, it's about indoctrination, it is about dehumanization. It is about them believing that the Palestinian people are lesser of a human beings. When on the first day of this whole situation, since the 7th of October, you have senior Israeli officials saying that everybody in Gaza is a human animal. They indoctrinate their soldiers. And their soldiers, when they're doing this, when this whole Gaza humanitarian fund was established, it was established not just to kill the Palestinians, but to humiliate the person you are going to kill. The whole idea is crushing your spirit, driving you all the way, miles, while you are starved, almost a skeleton. Walking all the way, put you in a cattle-like corridor. You've seen the images. The world have seen the images. And then the moment you get there, they spray you with bullets. You've seen the accounts in Haaretz where soldiers admitted, Israeli soldiers admitted to Israeli newspapers that they have had orders to shoot, to kill at the starving people. You've seen even accounts of international media, the Associated Press, of the American mercenaries who are war criminals, and we will hold them accountable. Every one of them, the American mercenaries, who have also told the international media they have orders to kill. One of them said that another mercenary was standing by him and he saw him shooting at a crowd of elderly women, children, because that crowd was moving slower than they should be. This is not just a political campaign. This is not just about control or hegemony. This is deep, deep hatred, evil, considering the entire people of Palestine to be unhuman and must be exterminated. And before they are exterminated, they must be blockaded, they must suffer and suffer. You know that saddest way of making your victim suffer the longest before you take his life or her life. That's the situation. This is absolutely unprecedented in human history, at least in recorded human history. We have seen dark chapters in human history, but to this level, to this extent, unprecedented.
To this extent, exactly, because you could say, for instance, during the Second World War, the populations could not necessarily see what was happening when not only Jewish people, but mainly Jewish people, communists, gays, whoever the Nazis thought didn't meet their racial superiority measures, were killed. People couldn't see what was going on. But people can see what's going on here. And I think what a lot of people, and this is what I wanted to get to, if I may, Britain in particular has a historic responsibility. It was there, it had the Palestine Mandate from the League of Nations. It withdrew, panicking. It should have had an election in 1948 when Britain left. It didn't. It handed power over to Ben Gurion. And the rest, of course, is history. We had the Balfour Declaration before that. We've had the partition of Israel, Palestine, but Palestine not recognised. And I suppose, knowing that, British politicians must think, well, surely we have a historic responsibility to be speaking up for the Palestinians. We were supposed to back in the day, and we failed them. So what is it, do you think, when you meet, when you don't have to talk about names, but when you meet British politicians or European politicians who are intelligent people, and you say what you're saying to me, to them, what is going on in their minds, do you think? Why have they so manifestly failed as far as so many people are concerned in this country and elsewhere in the world? Why have they failed to act?
In the past, it was because Israel was very successful in playing the game of deceit. Israel was very successful in creating a public image that it is the eternal victim. And if you go back, now this has changed. Now, almost always, whenever you have undemocratic decisions by the British government or by the US government, any Western government, almost always it's about Israel. Go back to history. So there is something, because now I can assure you that the public opinion of this country has completely and utterly shifted. And I am absolutely inspired, touched, empowered by what I see every single day in this country. The British people have been hit with the truth, and they have it in their heart, and they are going and going and growing. And now London has become the epicenter of the global movement for justice in Palestine, in every sense. Millions. I mean, I did not expect a 1 million Brit in the streets of London in one go for Palestine. And at the beginning, that was November 2023, everybody was telling me, oh, this will fade away. Remember, people will get tired, they will get fatigued, the scenes will be normalized, people will become numb. Nothing could be further from the truth. This movement has been growing and growing and growing and growing, and now it has become the largest and the longest solidarity movement in the history of this country. And this reminds me of the anti-apartheid movement, which you mentioned earlier, which also emanated from the UK. Emanated from London. I mean, this was the epicenter. So something is happening here that the government is refusing to completely heed to. They have taken some steps under the huge mounting pressure of the public and the parliament. I have to say, you see in the parliament, whenever there is a question time, almost 100% of it is on Gaza, on Palestine, calling for a ceasefire, calling for sanctions, calling for the immediate recognition of the state of Palestine. So there is such support in the parliament, and there is such support even within the various political parties. The issue gets stuck at the highest level of decision-making process. Here comes the UK-Israel relationship, which is a relationship that needs to be unpacked. And here comes the UK-Washington, the UK-US relations, and that also needs to be unpacked. Whenever we are closer to a policy that would meet the responsibilities, the historic, the Balfour Declaration, and what that has led us where we are today. The Zionist mantra of a land without a people, for a people without a land, found purchase in London at that time, in 1917. And if you look back at the Balfour Declaration, they did not see us as a people. They only defined us as non-Jewish minorities that have religious and civil rights, not even political or national. Of course, since then, things have changed, and the UK have recognized the Palestinian people, the Palestinian political representation, and is still short of recognizing our right to self-determination in the shape of a state. But the UK has got to really take full responsibility of feeding that monster 108 years ago, and where that monster has gotten us. Because if the starting point is the negation and the cancellation of an entire people, so the only solution would be violence against these people. And that violence has lasted for 107 years, relentlessly. And that violence is mass. So this is a moment when we take responsibility, and when the UK must be leading, not following. And you know what we have been calling for, working with our friends in the government, in the parliament, in the various political parties, in the civil society, and with the public at large. They have done some steps, including partial arms embargo, and we tell them, you cannot be half committed to international law. Either you are committed to legality or not. Either it's a full arms embargo because Israel is violating the very basic provisions of international law and your law, the UK law, or it's not. And there is conversation, but they did suspend some arms exports to Israel. They also took some sanctions against key settlers and settler organizations and some ministers like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, and we tell them also you cannot be selective. The whole ecosystem of the illegal colonial settlements is illegal according to you. You keep saying every morning statements from 10 Downing Street, from the Foreign Office, from the Parliament, that settlements are illegal. So if they're illegal, you have to impose sanctions on the entire ecosystem. So far, and they also declared that they fully respect the independence of the ICC, which is the accountability part. So far, they are meeting us somewhere in the middle because of the pressure of the public opinion, but that's not enough.
Yeah.
So we need to keep working. And I'm telling you this to tell you that public opinion matters. Many are saying it does matter. That's what's pressing the government here. So, and I see no option but for the government in the end to heed and listen to its own people. Something reminds me again of the anti-apartheid movement. Remember, the Thatcher government, the Reagan administration was not really with the people for a long time until came a point, a critical mass, when they had to become part of this almost consensus among their own people. And this is absolutely happening here in the EU. It's happening in all spheres.
And of course, the terrible irony, as you know, Excellency, is the British lawyers helped put together much of this international law in the first place. I mean, it's extraordinary. But I wondered if I might move on just to ask you about, so it's actually happened in recent weeks in Gaza. You would have seen the images of donkeys being garlanded by Palestinians, because they said the donkeys have done more for us here than lots of the Arab states around us. This might be a tricky question for you, but a lot of people really want to know, why have the Palestinians been so badly let down by countries in the immediate neighbourhood, Egypt? Maybe there are reasons for Jordan, but the Gulf states. I mean, here's another big question I just follow up with, which is that this President Trump, he likes gold, he likes palaces, he likes the Saudis. Why don't the Saudis pay? Why are they not saying to Donald Trump, end this, and we can have a much closer relationship and all the rest of it? What has been the problem with the Arab League? What has been the problem with the Arab brothers and sisters? They have not been as strong as many thought they could be.
We believe the Saudis have been telling President Trump enough is enough. We believe they have been telling him time to end this carnage and time to move in the direction of peace and justice. We believe they asked him for an immediate recognition of the state of Palestine, and we know that. And they were about to convene a conference in New York, France and Saudi Arabia, as you may remember, to bring the world together for the recognition of the state of Palestine as a step, just a step towards a multilateral international conference to actually implement the international will and end the occupation and establish a state of Palestine. And you remember at that period, Israel has done the biggest political and diplomatic and narrative sabotage in modern history by the attacking Iran, and all that exchange that happened derailed the Saudi initiative and the French initiative. The Arab world, including Egypt, have been presenting an initiative after another, including an initiative for a ceasefire and an initiative for the humanitarian situation to be dealt with, and of course the reconstruction of Gaza. And you have heard about the Arab Summit in Cairo and all that happened. Of course, we need more support from the Arab world. And at a time when we're going through this genocide, when Israel has literally destroyed every single source of life, not just lives, but livelihoods, we need help. Of course we need help, and we'll be working with our Arab friends, Arab brothers and sisters. But remember, Mark, in the end, this is an Arab-Israeli conflict, not just a Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And yes, we have differences here and there, but in the last 22 months, Israel has attacked much of the region. Remember that, and has breached every agreement with all actors. It has breached its own agreement with Egypt about the borders with Rafah. And they breach agreements via tanks and jet fighters and what have you. They have attacked Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and what have you. So the region is also at the receiving end of this Israeli impunity, this Israeli mind of being the master of the region, that they have to be the hegemon of the region. So we need to work with our regional partners much more to make sure that this does not continue and that Israel, if it wants to be part of the region, does not behave in a way that it bombs its way into the region. You cannot bomb. They bomb Beirut and Damascus and here and there. You do not bomb your way into the region. You have to accept that the region has its own components and rights, including, of course, the rights of the Palestinian people. So while I see that there are some shortcomings here and there, and we need more help, I really see the issue is more with the Western support, because without the US, Israel would not have been able to do what it has done. Absolutely. And we cannot just deflate, should this Saudi Arabia has been trying to present a peace plan for a long time, Mark. Yeah. They have supported the Palestinian people financially, and I mean a lot, over the decades, to make sure that we can steadfast, withstand, stay on our land. Yes, of course, from time to time we need more support. But the issue in the end is that whenever it comes to Israel, the US puts Israel before the entire region, as you've just seen in the last 2 weeks. So perhaps regionally we need to work together to change that dynamics.
Looking at media coverage of what we have seen, so much of the reporting is coming from Palestinian journalists inside Gaza and also the West Bank, but primarily inside Gaza because, as you know, the Israelis won't allow any other journalists in. Now, at one stage, some politicians were saying and some media were saying, well, perhaps we haven't been as good in reporting what's really going on because we can't get in. But do you think, in your dealings with journalists, do you think that's a fair comment? Because there's been an awful lot of pressure exerted on here in this country on the BBC from within and from without that has seen at least 2 prominent documentaries either blocked altogether or, with the latest, Doctors Under Fire, which you will have seen, that incredibly courageous film from Basement Films, was actually shown by Channel 4 television in this country. So I suppose the question is, do you have a message for journalists in this country? And do you think they need to be a lot bolder and more challenging and, well, take things upon themselves to say, this isn't good enough? I mean, some journalists, to be fair, at the BBC have done that. They've written to the Director General, 100 or so. But what is it about the failure of some of the mainstream media, if you like, to report fairly, properly, accurately? All you have to do is report accurately.
First, I don't think it's a failure of journalists. I think it's a failure of journalism. And here I mean more the establishment, the traditional mainstream platforms, such as the BBC. They have wonderful journalists, but the establishment needs to rethink, reconsider. And I don't expect them to be brave, or I don't want them to be. What I want them to be is truthful. Truthful to their own profession, that's all. Well, yes, the BBC has prevented several documentaries from being shown, documentaries that have been solicited by them, sanctioned by them, under some pressure to block the truth and not to show the reality, which is disgraceful, shameful in every sense, for a media institution as old, as independent as the BBC, particularly in light of the fact that Israel has blocked the BBC and the entire international media from accessing Gaza. Every time I went to the BBC for an interview, I would tell them, you should start the interview by saying, Gaza, which the international media has been blocked by Israel to access, and we don't know exactly, as opposed to starting always that, some terminology to doubt Palestinian narrative. But also I have been meeting the leadership of the BBC, regularly rather, and I talk to them many issues. At the beginning of this, in October 2023, I met all the editors, including the chief and the director, the CEO and everyone. And throughout, up until very recently, the chairman, about serious issues, very serious issues. And we have exchanged with them a lot of these serious issues on the basis of professionalism. We only want these platforms, these media outlets to be professional. That's all. And professional means convey the truth, convey the truth. When you have such a powerful documentary by a group of Palestinian children, don't pull the card of neutrality in my face.
I've just got a couple more questions, if I may, because we're probably beginning to run out of time. But I wanted to just come back to you on this issue of the media, because we interviewed here at Palestine Deep Dive Kenneth Stern, who is the author of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. And I remember him saying to us, and this was maybe a couple of years ago, as I said, I'm very concerned that this could be used to prevent criticism of Israel. Now, I think all of that has been proven, that the allegation of anti-Semitism, which is a very, very serious claim to make, has had arguably a cooling effect on journalism. People are afraid that they're going to be accused of being anti-Semitic if they are critical of Israel or if they're critical of extreme Zionist settler ideology, and if they make this comparison between that and apartheid and say it's racist. So what do you say to people out there who say, because frequently we hear from the Israeli government this language, it's a blood libel, it's anti-Semitism, and this frightens people. People don't like anti-Semitism, they don't like racism. So what would you say to people who get browbeaten and they say it's anti-Semitic to criticize Israel?
Nobody likes to be called racist, of course. But people are increasingly realizing that the conflation between anti-Semitism, which is vile and must be uprooted, and between criticism of Israel and criticism of an Israeli government that is genocidal in every intent and in every practice, is very legitimate. That generalization on anybody who criticizes Israel is no longer as effective as it used to be. They really managed to muddy the water over the years. They really managed to conflate all these things. They managed to confuse people that if you criticize an Israeli government, you are anti-Semite. I don't think it's working anymore. They have used it, they have used one muscle too many. And now it's not as effective. I think people realize that it is their right and it is their duty and our duty and obligation to actually criticize the genocidal acts of a state, of a government that is a member of the international system. And not only it is a right, it is again an obligation. So they realize that. And for the cause of fighting anti-Semitism, this does not help. It doesn't help. We must completely and utterly separate between those who hate any people for the sake of them being Muslims, Jews, Islamophobia also is there. And we must all, as Muslims and Jewish and Jews and Christians, we must all fight this because all of us are victims of this. But we must draw such an ironclad, complete separation between that, the hate for identity and religion and color and creed, and because how tall you are or how short you are, we must fight that, and between the policies of a state. And I think that separation is happening, that distinction is happening, and it's happening as a mass scale. That threat, that intimidation over the heads of people is less now. People realize, don't enough. Yeah. And I meet many of them. Don't pull that card. It's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Finally, Ambassador, if I may, we've covered a lot in this interview, but one thing really stands out amongst so many other things globally, geopolitically, internationally, looking at what has happened to the United Nations, to international law, and the enormous damage that has been done. You could argue by Russia invading Ukraine. You could most certainly say the same about what is happening in Israel. It's a difficult, because on the one hand you want to be optimistic, but on the other hand you have to be realistic. But looking at the enormous damage that's been done to the international architecture by Israel in particular, what hope do you have of reaching some kind of solution which could possibly lead to maybe a secular one state, or maybe the two states, whatever it is that people will settle on? If you were to look into your crystal ball and say, where will we be in 2 years' time? Do you think we're going to be in a better place in Palestine?
You see, at this point in time, it's very difficult to be optimistic. But it is necessary to be hopeful. And there is a difference between optimism and hope. Mm-hmm. And I'm very hopeful, my friend. I'm really hopeful. I'm hopeful because our people has made Israel's 108 years old project since the Balfour failed. We're there. We stay. We're going nowhere. And despite the horrors, the evil, the Palestinian people are on their land and raising their children a generation after a generation for the attachment of their land, their homeland, culture, our heritage. And you know, we are a very rooted society. I mean, one of the most ancient civilizations. I mean, we pride ourselves to be the crossroad of civilizations, the hub between East and West, the birthplace of Christianity, most sacred place to Muslims and Jews. But this is Palestine. Jerusalem is our land. And I think the first source of hope is this summud, steadfastness of our people, belief in their heart that in the end justice will be served. The second hope is this unprecedented human solidarity with their fellow Palestinians. I mean, it's serious. Listen, this is serious. When I read even in the US polls, now you have more than half of the American people see Israel in the most unfavorable, generally, all Americans. Among the Democrats, almost two-thirds see Israel as a very unfavorable. This is the complete, you know, what's the flipping it upside down, reversion of the whole picture in this period. People no longer, there is no ability of the mainstream media to censor, government to censor. Number one, our children were able to document their own execution via their parents' mobile phones. This is the first time. First time people have been able to document their own annihilation. And then, you know, sending it, conveying it to the world. And the world was able to receive this. Of course, one day after another, 1 week after another, on your mobile screens. But this has created a situation where people not only realize what is happening, no. People are mobilized. They are mobilized to change this reality with us and to walk with us the last mile. This is another big source of hope. A third source of hope is in the very end, the Israeli people will come to the fact that they cannot just continue being the bully. They cannot just exist without a real political project that not only see themselves, but see the other. They don't see us in any future. They must realize, and I hope that all that carnage that they have caused, all the madness, all the suffering, will also come back for them to think again. And you know, after each such huge crisis, sometimes it is a reason why people rethink. And perhaps they will rethink all the way what Netanyahu has brought upon them for the last 20 years. You cannot just exist without any moral cover, any legal cover, any political cover, any human cover. You cannot exist just because you say, I am entitled. You cannot exist just because you say, I am superior. I'm the chosen. You cannot exist because you say, the Bible said so. You cannot exist because you say, I can kill with impunity. You can only exist if you have a political vision and a moral vision that will allow you to live and let live. And I hope with all the combination of things, the Israelis will realize at one point, A, they cannot exterminate the Palestinian people. B, they have to find a future based on achieving and fulfilling people's rights rather than undermining them and using only violence. The only option Israel has now, and for a long time, by the way, it's violence. They have no, think with me, there's nothing. The only thing they revert to, and this is their automatic sort of policy, violence and mass violence and more violence, and now it's genocide. that doesn't get you anywhere. It just gets you where you are today at the ICC. And we will pursue every war criminal. We will. If I want to spend the rest of my life marking anything, it will be in the accountability. Nothing will make me be more motivated than seeing every single person who pulled the trigger, who conspired, who is complicit with the murder of my people, will meet justice and will be served with justice. And the victims will receive justice. And the next war criminals will be deterred. So I am hopeful that all this will happen. It's slow. The wheels of justice is sometimes spin in a slower than what we want. You know that saying, the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice? That's Martin Luther King, by the way. I think in our case it's very correct. The arc is so long of history. We've been oppressed, suppressed, ethnically cleansed. Apartheid is being imposed on us for decades. Our land is being taken on a regular basis. Our children is being grounded without trial or charge. This is one of the longest human suffering in modern history. How long it is definitely bending and bending and bending towards justice.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Ambassador, and also for that message for hope. And thank you also to all of you at home for joining us. And please join us again next time. Thank you very much.